No, the TikTok ban is not about the app itself, it's about geopolitics. And today I'm going to tell you everything about it. I'm going to tell you some of the misinformation and disinformation that's out there. I'm going to tell you what this is really about and what you can do to prepare yourself for what's about to come in this world, because the actions that are being taken against China, they should be a concern to you for a number of reasons, and we're going to get to this later on in the video. But I want to start out talking about, because I'm seeing so many videos of people analyzing that TikTok ban, and it's all about more regulation, it's all about higher taxes, and it's all about making people's lives more difficult than it already is. If you've followed the TikTok ban, and before I'm actually going to talk about that, I'm also going to talk about what our industry leader has been talking about the TikTok ban and how it's all about like taxes and more regulation, which is BS. It's not true, and I'm going to tell you about that in a moment. However, how the TikTok ban happened, it was all over the news, right? The CEO, a Singaporean guy, well, basically they allowed content published on TikTok that clearly goes against its own policies and against international law. So a decision was made that TikTok basically has two options, right? They either move out of the US completely, so TikTok would be banned in America. That's one option. Option two is that TikTok sells the company to someone in America, which of course is the preferred option. So America gets to keep the app. And I'm not saying that American entrepreneurs are angels, because they're not. Just take a look at Sam Bankman-Fried. What happened there. I mean, it's a massive scandal, massive fraud. And I'm not saying that TikTok is a fraud. I'm not saying that, because it's not, up to this point, it's not a fraud. But certain content that's being pushed by TikTok is questionable and goes against policies, And so the authorities now gave TikTok two options, okay? You either get the hell out of the United States, or you sell your company to an American who runs it based on our rule of law, based on our policies, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we'll see what happens, but it's a little bit controversial, because if you just take a look at apps in America, there's been a lot of problems there too. But because it is a Chinese app, because it is a China app, they want to take this action, but it has not much to do about the app, and it has much more to do with the geopolitical situation that we're seeing between the two superpowers, America and China, and we're going to get to this in a moment. But anyway, our industry leader, he makes everything about more regulation, higher taxes, making it harder for entrepreneurs, because yes, America wants more socialism. America wants everyone to be on the fixed paycheck, right? America wants every single American to be on a fixed monthly income, right? Universal income, whatever you want to call it, which already exists. Social Security is universal income. But they want to make it even broader. They want to give everyone these benefits, and it's all about destroying entrepreneurs in America. It's all about making lives for business owners more difficult, and it's all about regulation. It's all about higher taxes. It's all about taking your freedoms away. It's all about making your life hell. If you listen to that's pretty much what you get to hear. But it's not really the full picture. It's not. There's a thing called the law of cause and effect, okay? And he doesn't get it. He just does not get that, because in this very instance, my friend, it's not so much about the app, because America could have done this already a long time ago. And they could have done this with different apps, with different companies out of China, because China is known to have stolen US intellectual property for years. And we've seen changes happening now. So many companies are moving out of China, they're moving into Mexico. And right now, Mexico is America's biggest trading partner, which is great, because there's just more unity there. There's more shared interest, more common interest. And so it's better for America, much better for America. Because if a country can only get ahead by stealing intellectual property, by stealing technology, I'm talking about China right now, because that's all China has done over the past years. China hasn't really invented anything. No matter how much the media and people even on this platform try to portray China as the most innovative country on the planet, it really isn't. Like, just go on Google, search for top inventions of China over the past 100 years. It really isn't. Like, the companies that exist in China, they have replicated American technology. And because of these replications that have been made, China was able to advance its economy, and China is possibly the biggest economy right now, even though they're not being honest about their numbers. But it is likely America is still the biggest economy. But anyway, going back to an industry leader who claims that it's all about regulation and it's all about the IRS and the American government wanting more of your tax money and making the lives of American entrepreneurs more difficult. No, it's not. Or, saying that, oh, it's bad for foreign companies to come into the US because they're going to get regulated, this and that. Regulation is a good thing, okay? Regulation is a good thing. Just take a look at life expectancy, how that's gone up, I think that guns should be more regulated in America in certain places, or possibly everywhere. It should be a little bit harder to get a gun, I mean, you should have to pass some psychological tests because not everyone should be allowed to own a gun. If you're not psychologically fit to own a gun, you shouldn't have one. And I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore industry, and I don't like when people misbehave and this and this and that, and it's all it's all self-centered talk. It's all like inappropriate, it's irrelevant, it's half-truths, it's not what this is all about. So let's get down to why the TikTok ban really happened. The TikTok ban happened or is happening because China has gotten fat financially. China has gotten real fat financially. And China's military assertiveness in different geographic locations across the globe is worrying. It's worrying not just the Americans, but the international community as well. Like things that we're now seeing in Fiji, where China just flies into Fiji with a plane full of Chinese police officers, is kind of frightening. If China can do that, and if China can open up police stations across the globe in countries where it's not even allowed to operate, if they can do that, and think about what is yet to come. Just think about that. And we've talked about the Chinese police stations for already more than a year. And now the biggest channel has mentioned it too in a recent video, and that's perfectly fine. We have talked about this already a long time ago. How do you get China to talk? How do you get China to comply? Because at the end of the day, China agreed to comply to international law, but they haven't done that. And now that the country, I'm talking about China, is getting bigger, financially speaking, and China has the biggest navy right now. It's no longer the US Navy, it's the Chinese Navy, or the CCP Navy. It's the biggest navy right now. And so the only way for China to return to the negotiating table and agree to deals that make sense for both parties, that are equally balanced, because trade deals with China have never been equally balanced in terms of imports and exports. We're talking about ratio. It has never been balanced. And so I personally don't buy Chinese products anymore because I don't need them. I'm forced into buying certain products because American companies still manufacture them in China. I want them to get out of China and start manufacturing them in, for instance, Eastern Europe or Latin America or even Africa, where I know that the money is not going to end up in the hands of the CCP. And many of you guys share the same thoughts. It is time for us to stop funding China. And it starts at the top, the fish rots from the head down. It really does. And so if we can drain China financially, if we can drain the CCP, and this is the job of every single Western person who is not part of the Eastern mentality, who is not part of the Eastern political system. That's how I wanted to say it. If you're part of the Eastern political system, then what I'm telling you right now may not matter to you. But if you care about where the planet is right now, and if you feel that, because there are two distinct paths here, there is a path that's more sound, that's more reasonable, that's more fair. And in my humble opinion, that's the Western option. And then you have the Eastern option, which is incredibly self-centered. And I'm not talking specifically about Russia and China. I'm talking about the politics of these two countries. They're incredibly self-centered, and I think that's good in certain ways. Like, a country should look out for its own interests first, and then help other countries. I think that should be secondary, because if you cannot help yourself, you can never help others. However, certain countries, talking about Western countries, they're incredibly generous. America is a very generous country. Just look at what you get when you immigrate to America. It's a very generous country. As much as many European countries are very generous countries. They're very generous to immigrants. And there are a lot of arguments to make against generosity, and I totally agree with that. And it's also true that we've become too generous scenarios where everything is given away, and that's not a good thing. If you give away too much for free, someone takes it, they don't appreciate it because they don't have to work for it. You don't appreciate something, the same way when you get it for free than if you had to work for it. That's common sense. And then there's the Philippines, like China is bullying the Philippines in the South China Sea, like big time. And they're doing it in a way that it's not like crazily aggressive, but they're making certain moves to pretty much tell the Philippines and the leadership of that country that, hey, you know what, this actually belongs to us. This area, these islands, they're ours, even though China has no proof that that is the case. But in China's mind, everything that we can occupy is ours. And that threatens the smaller nations now in Asia. If America were not to protect these smaller countries, maybe people in those smaller countries, say 50 years later, 100 years later, they'll all be speaking Chinese. There's nothing wrong with Chinese, China is a beautiful country, lots of good food, an interesting country, beautiful sceneries. It has so much good, it's very modern. There's a lot of good in China. But the problem is the differences between the politics of the two superpowers. That's the biggest problem. Like Russia is not really a country to worry about because all hat and no cattle. Russia is not strong economically, it just isn't. Militarily speaking, also not strong. They have a lot of soldiers, sure, but they're not trained soldiers. They're like kids that are being put in uniforms against their will. That dog don't hunt. Think about it. Nobody took Hitler serious until it was too late. Hitler was a bad guy. He was part Austrian and part German. You know what the end result was with Hitler? Like, he recommended that Mexico takes back the land the Americans stole from Mexico. You know how America got involved in World War II, right? Hitler recommended Mexico to take back the land America stole from Mexico. We're talking about Texas, And then America said, hey, hold on. Now you're putting your finger in our soup. We don't want that. We were not going to interfere with your problems in Europe, but now you're encouraging our neighbor, our southern neighbor, to invade our country and take back the land that we took from them. No. That's what they thought, and so this happened because of that, and so it feels like with power, and that's actually proven historically speaking, just look at the Roman Empire. The reason why empires failed a lot of the times is because they expanded too much. They spent too much money on their military, they expanded too much, and they couldn't hold the territory. They were not properly funded, and the people were not united within that empire. And that's a big problem. Just to go back to the World War II stuff that we just talked about, American income tax rate peaked during this time, like from 1944 through 1963, the income tax rate was over 90%. And I think 94% was the highest Americans ever paid. And that was the result of a world war. Now just let that sink in for a moment. Of course, that's for people who reached the highest income tax bracket. So people who earned a lot less or who were poor, they didn't pay 94%. Of course not. But we're talking about the richest of the richest. They paid as much as 94% in taxes. That was the highest tax rate ever in America. Then starting in 1964, the income tax rate started declining. And it reached an all-time low. Now talking about post-World War II, it reached an all-time low in 1987. And now, of course, it's gone up again, so it is what it is. And now think about it, if we, like the West, were to get involved with China or Russia, which is definitely on the table, this is not like an unrealistic scenario. It could very well happen in the next couple of years or decade. If one party just makes one mistake, a big mistake, then we're all in. And if we're all in, then you got to get ready for higher taxes because it's the only way to reset everything, And so a lot of people are going to lose a lot if the latter happens, If another World War happens, World War III happens, then we're going to lose everything. And it may not end in a nuclear war. There's no proof that it will end in a nuclear war because even during World War II, we had access to nuclear weapons. However, nowadays it's different, because more nations than ever have access to nuclear weapons. And all this is also stolen technology, The Russians stole the technology from the Manhattan Project, it had a spy. So Russia stole it from America, and then the Russians, they brought that technology, that knowledge into China, and then it spread more and blah, 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 blah. So that's the problem with technology. That's the problem with knowledge, You can invent as much as you want. You cannot protect it as much. as you would like. You can protect it, but not as much as you would like. And that's how the nuclear bomb technology pretty much got, stolen. The information leaked from the Manhattan Project, and that was the end of that. But think about it, if one country were to hold that technology, and one country only were to hold that technology, then we would be in a different situation. Certain countries, I know that America is the only country that has used atomic bombs on another country, but it was to end the war because the Japanese back then, they were crazy, they were absolutely crazy, and they didn't stop. So hopefully we're not going to see something like that again, because nowadays atomic bombs are much stronger, they're much more optimized than they were back then. Now the question you need to answer for yourself is, where do you want to be living, And maybe soon, and possibly sooner than we would like, we might have to pick a side here, And I have picked my side, and you have to pick yours. I mean, at some point you have to. Now you need to pick it eventually, because I think it's important that you are aligned with one superpower or the other, and you make that choice, whatever fits your long-term goals, whatever fits your values. And for me, it's not communism, but I understand for some people it is. Or some people are so fed up with the West that they automatically choose the East. And of course, not all countries in the East are communist countries. No, I'm not saying that. But you're going to see more countries influenced by China, and you're going to see more countries influenced by America. And so I'm all for paying more taxes so that we can have more influence and, proceed with what we started and finish with what we started. If a Trump presidency happens in 2024, in late 2024, actually beginning 2025, then we really have to consider certain things, because Trump pointed out that if he were to get back into office, he were to, put a pretty high tax on Chinese imports. I think he did mention the figure of 60%, which would be incredibly high. That would put a lot of US companies out of business. And maybe sometimes that's what's required to balance power again, because China's becoming more powerful. And so sometimes the only way for us to preserve what we have is by pulling the brakes. And sometimes, it's just better to do less to have more. And maybe we all have to pay the price for that, because we all live now from Chinese products. And maybe we're looking at a time where things are changing, where we won't be consuming as many Chinese products as we did over the past 3 decades or so, 4 decades almost. Times are changing. And because of that, I think we're now looking at times of great sacrifice, great personal sacrifice. And now, Mr. H, it's not just about more control and higher taxes, more regulation, and making the lives of Americans harder. No, it's not about that. No, it's not about that. The goody two-shoes of the offshore industry, no, it's not about that, bro. It's not. It's about something much deeper, which you're not going to understand, because you only look at things, from a financial angle. You're only really scratching on the surface, Mr. H. And that's not how life works, Liberty is not for free, and there's a price to pay. Everything that we enjoy, that's what I believe, everything that we enjoy right now is because of the sacrifices our ancestors made, and we should be very grateful. We have lived, and we're living during the great time, or the greatest time ever. This is the greatest time ever in terms of freedom, in terms of availability for food, in terms of what we can do. We can fly internationally for little money, literally little money. I know there are some exceptions, of course, where there's less demand. It's all about supply and demand, but I think we're living in a great time, and we're enjoying high life expectancies. Yes, we're paying more in taxes, but security has been pretty good. Healthcare is pretty good. Roads are pretty good. The politics, it could be better, but they could be a lot worse too. The taxes could be a lot worse. Safety could be a lot worse. Everything could be a lot worse. So this is not the worst time ever. In fact, this is the best time ever, and you have everything that you need to create success. Even if you're now in an emerging country, the amount of information that you can absorb by just opening up Google, looking at your computer, reading information, or just learning from people, you are living, through the best times ever. There's no debate about that. And just because everything is so perfect doesn't mean that we have to start complaining about it, everything where there's a minor problem. It's so stupid. We don't have to do that. We should be grateful for what we have, not what we don't have. You can always have more. You can always be bigger or become bigger, do more, have more, sure. But but it's also about coming from an attitude of gratitude where we compare ourselves to people who lived 150 years ago, and then we're like, hey, you know, they had a life expectancy of 40 or 50 years, and now it's like almost like double in certain countries, you know, so we're actually doing quite good. So we have done good things. However, it must not always go uphill. That's something to remember too. Why does it always need to go uphill? You know, why does everything have to be perfect all the time? Why do we always have to be progressing and doing better? Sometimes you have to slow down so you can speed up again. It's just the rule of nature. It's the rule of human evolvement. Sometimes we just have to look at things a little bit differently. It's not just all about taxes. It's not just about control. It's not just about, you know, making the lives of our people harder and, you know, just suffering. It's not about that. I mean, suffering is always part of life, and suffering is actually a good thing. Suffering is a good thing. Pain is necessary for growth in every regard, you know. We have cultivated new generations of entitled people, you know, who were spoon-fed the best of the best. Everything was handed to them on a silver platter. They didn't have to work for anything. Everything was given to them, and yet they're so unappreciative, and they're still complaining about certain things that aren't even a concern to people in emerging countries. And I'm just making an example here, you know, like for instance, you know, we've been complaining so much about restrictions during the past health crisis. Okay, there was some real suffering there, no question about that. You know, there was real suffering. We all didn't like wearing masks. You know, we all, you know, we didn't want to be locked out of certain places. You know, we were restricted from flying. We were not allowed to go to certain places unless we were vaccinated. Okay, that's all the past, you know, but now that you have experienced a little bit of pain, a little bit of suffering, think about how worse it could have been. Or think about how worse it will be once something really bad happens, because now we're so used, you know, we have like this self-image where everything is perfect. Everything is rosy. We have this like perception of ourselves, you know, and it is tied to our self-worth. It's tied to how we want to be perceived. And that can change in a heartbeat. You don't make that decision, you don't make that call. Some leader in some country makes a decision that changes your life and my life forever, our lives forever, and that's the end of that. And that can happen in a heartbeat, and there's nothing that you and I can do about it. However, what we can do, which is something that I've been stressing so much throughout this channel, is to just be appreciative for the things that we have. And let's stop complaining about the problems, the taxes, politics. Certain things could be better. Politicians could be better. The taxes could be lower. All of this is true. Yes, I get it. And yes, you know, we're moving more towards control in certain areas, some countries more than others. Some countries are having more freedom than ever before, which is great. But still, be appreciative. Be appreciative for what you have, and you're going to have a much better time. You're going to be much happier, and you're going to be grateful, because eventually hard times will arrive. I truly appreciate you watching the video until the end. Thank you so much. If you're not a subscriber to this channel yet, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed and hit that notification bell to be notified when we upload a new video. And if you really want to help me out, please click that like button. As always, thank you for watching, and we see you on the next video.